shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is Dr. BJ Hardick. BJ was raised in a holistic family and is an organic food fanatic, green living aficionado, and has spent the majority of his life working in natural healthcare. Having graduated in 2001 from Life University as a doctor of chiropractic, he is in full-time clinical practice in London, Ontario. Outside of patient hours, Dr. Hardick is known for speaking on his natural health strategies to numerous professionals and public audiences every year in the United States and Canada. In 2009, he wrote his first book, Maximized Living Nutrition Plans, which has now been used professionally in over 500 health clinics, alongside a follow-up publication to which he was contributor, The Cancer Killers. Dr. Hardick regularly blogs healthy recipes and holistic health articles on the Huffington Post and on his own website, drhardick.com. He serves on the advisory board for greenmedinfo.com, the world's most widely referenced natural health database. In his spare time, he invests his keen interest in sustainable living into urban development in his hometown of London, Ontario. All Dr. Hardick's passions are anchored in helping others achieve ecologically sound, healthy, balanced lives. Audience, when I found out one of my chiropractic schoolmates and friend of nearly 20 years wrote an ebook on detoxification, I knew I had to have him on our podcast. BJ, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be a guest, having listened to your show so many times.
Great. So let's get right into it. Dr. Hardick, tell us about your story.
Well, as you know, I've grown up living a healthy, naturally focused, holistic lifestyle my entire life. I was born in a chiropractic family. My father's a chiropractor. My uncle's a chiropractor. I grew up even as a little kid remembering that I was always, living differently. I remember, the kids that would have to, line up for their routine medical evaluations and vaccines and visits to the doctor. And I never partook in any of that. I know that, in my early years, my family had a giant focus on prevention. We had a giant focus on just recognizing that the body was designed to be self-healing, self-regulating. I remember as a young child learning that the body was designed to heal itself. So this really was the way I lived. By the time I actually got to professional school, I remember having it out with a lot of my, not professional school, but even undergraduate school. I went to Queen's University alongside a lot of folks that wanted to go to medical school. And of course, I just knew that my philosophy was significantly different than their philosophy. Of course, our philosophy over here has always been that the body is designed to heal itself, and when the body's not healing itself, there's something interfering with the body's innate healing abilities. Where I quickly learned in school that more of the medical paradigm really came down to blaming the genes or blaming the environment or blaming bad luck. Where unfortunately I knew that there was a better way. So obviously, having gone through undergraduate school, I went into chiropractic school. That was where I met you. And really, it was those were some of the greatest years. To be surrounded by some of the leaders that we were. But it wasn't long, Noah, that even growing up in this lifestyle, eating very cleanly. I talk in the new ebook, Real Detox, about how I was just a couple years into practice. And it was really, once I got back home from school, I could start, exercising a lot more, taking better care of myself, running and exercising and eating well on a regular schedule. But it wasn't even 5 years that I was home that I started to get very, very sick. I was teaching nutrition, adjusting patients, leading workshops on how to exercise, but I started to really deal with some severe gut issues, some severe energy issues, and at first, when you're the healthy guy, when you're the doctor, you don't really want to tell people about that because it's almost embarrassing and you're wondering, well, what could it possibly be? I sure enough thought that, perhaps, initially when I had some digestive things going on, I thought, okay, maybe I have some type of intestinal virus having, traveled or something like that. And then sure enough, that never cleared out. I did all kinds of testing to find out if I had, any food sensitivities, because that was, starting to pick up some traction with other healthcare providers that I knew. And I remember going in and finding out with one test that I had sensitivities to 5 or 10 of these foods, and then I would do another test and it would give me the opposite answer. I even remember working with some people for whom I have great respect and doing all the blood work and doing all the panels, and finding out that I was deficient in certain nutrients. I will never forget the day when I was, again, energy was in the tank. I would have to take, extensive naps daily. Didn't matter how much I had slept the night before or what I had eaten the day before. But I will never forget the day that I went to a seminar. It was just a weekend seminar. And, us healthy folks, we always like to, pack our food and pack our snacks. But I'm telling you, I had packed like this bag of vitamins. I mean, this thing was like the size of a mason jar full of vitamins that I just needed for 48 hours, because those were supposedly all the nutrients that I was missing in my already good, clean, healthy, organic diet. And I just, I really, really felt like there was something missing, and sure enough, I went away to a seminar, and this is where I started to learn more about not just that in which we can be deficient. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people that are deficient in nutrients. I mean, when you look at obviously the nutrients that are depleted from the soils, the nutrients that are not available when people are eating conventional foods, but that wasn't me. I go to this seminar and I start learning about toxicity. I start learning about heavy metal poisoning. And for the first time, that's when it clicked. And I thought, wait a second, maybe it's not that I'm deficient in something. Maybe I'm actually toxic with something. Maybe there's something actually, interfering with my innate healing ability. And that's what really, really led me down this path of, and it made all the sense in the world congruently for me as a chiropractor, because this was always the philosophy that we always knew. We always knew that if there was an interference to the natural healing mechanisms, we just had to remove that interference, and sure enough, the body would have the best ability to heal.
So then what was affecting your innate ability to heal? What was the substance?
I went on to go through testing to determine what my levels of environmental and heavy metal toxicities were. And my mercury levels were 5 times greater than what was considered the allowable limit for chronic mercury in a person's body. A lot of people, when they talk about mercury poisoning, they don't really understand what it is that they're looking for. A lot of times, in the medical world, we would look for acute mercury poisoning. And of course, very few people have acute mercury poisoning. I mean, this would be somebody who was just only recently exposed to like a broken thermometer or something like that. But I was actually tested, more for deep chronic mercury, stuff that would get, stored up in, bound up into the cells, bound up into the brain, bound up into the tissues, stuff that your body just has some limitation of matter in being able to detox. So I get this report back, and of course, in order to do this testing, I talk about it in the ebook Real Detox. You've got to take certain supplements alongside your 24-hour test to determine just how much mercury is in your system upon the test. And again, it came back 5 times greater than what was considered normal. Now, I would say, and you would probably agree, that there should be no normal, allowable, acceptable limit of mercury in a person's body.
Agreed.
But at that point, it was kind of like, hey, if you had a number less than 5, you were okay, and mine was 25. And plus I was excessively high in lead, I was excessively high in nickel, I was excessively high in thallium. And that's when it clicked, and I thought, okay, well, there's a major source of interference. And I'll never forget, a consultant from the lab where the test came said, I've never seen a number this high. And of course, obviously, a lot of listeners, when they think about mercury, they think about vaccines. Well, I didn't have the rounds of vaccines when I was a young child. We think about flu shots and all these other ways that heavy metals can get into the system. And initially, and I thought, well, wait a second, if my number is this high, how high would the numbers be for so many other millions of people out there, when I actually tried to stay away from all the toxic stuff for my entire lifetime, for 30 years up until that point?
So then let us know why you think your heavy metal load was so high.
It's interesting. At first, I didn't really care. I just wanted to get rid of it,
Right.
And oftentimes I'll work with a patient in the chiropractic clinic who will want to know why there's a certain problem that's developed, or did it relate to an accident when they were 5 years old, or 30 years old, or 20 years old. But I really, really find when you're sick, when you're not doing well, you just want to start working on yourself. You just want to start addressing the cause of the problem. But sure enough, along this path, I went and, I had my mom got tested for her levels of chronic heavy metals. And sure enough, when we looked at the 17 toxic heavy metals in me, her levels, when you looked at the bar graphs, were almost identical. So we started to do a lot of study to realize, again, the study was done, 20 years ago now, that mercury, for instance, can be transmitted to the young child both across the placenta, but also even in breast milk. So it's very, very common that we would see that children can have similar levels of heavy toxic metals as would their parents. There's been some estimates out there that even if like 4 generations of families would just start living pure, living clean, allow no more toxicities into their life. And of course, that gets harder and harder every year, but it's estimated it would take several generations for people to be able to clear that, because it does get passed on to the child. So we know the studies that are out there, it certainly can cross the placenta, can come through breast milk, and then of course now we have all the additional exposures that other children can face if they want to get exposed to these things. But certainly I have to believe that it had come from my mom. Now I had actually had just a couple small silver mercury fillings as a child, but certainly I didn't have, the gamut of them. It's amazing to me. I teach seminars now and people have no idea that these silver fillings contain 50% mercury. They're called silver fillings, but they really should be called mercury fillings. It's like cheesecake, so cheesecake isn't totally cheese, but it's mainly cheese. So it really, like mercury fillings, we should call them what they are, and they are mercury. It's really, really quite, disgusting and bothersome. I know here in Canada, although our healthcare system is a little different from your healthcare system, little kids, families on fixed incomes, people that might not have a lot of money for their healthcare, it's not uncommon that if someone's health insurance was going to look after a child getting a cavity filled, the insurance will pay for the mercury filling because it's cheap, but it won't pay the extra to use something like a composite filling or something even better that would be more bioidentical. Now, of course, my mom, had a whole mouthful of mercury fillings. So I've got to assume that my mom had a ton of mercury from her exposures in her lifetime. Even back in the 1990s, even eye care products, had mercury. Our parents would recall, playing with mercury in high school class. It was quicksilver. It was this mystical gas that they could change the state of. So I've got to believe it came from my mom, and of course I saw that through the testing as well. And I think nowadays definitely that's going to continue to happen with kids. I don't know if there's been enough testing to find out which metals transfer over, which environmental toxins do and don't, but certainly we do know that there can be transmission into the kids.
BJ, tell our audience, what are some of our body's own natural detoxification methods?
Well, this is the thing, so again, when I started looking at this for me, you've got to realize this was the most medical approach of anything in my entire life, right? So growing up for 30 years, I never took a medication. I did have a family doctor. He was my next door neighbor. I had one and I would go over if there were, medical emergencies, but I had never really followed any medical protocols. And this was the first time that I start, taking a bunch of vitamins and, getting all this lab work and all this blood testing. So I say that because I know that so many of the listeners out there, obviously want to do things naturally. They want to do things holistically, but we've got to also realize that once we do reach a certain point, there can be, again, limitations to your body's ability to heal. Now, my biggest, one of the things that I appreciate most is the ability to help people understand that, yes, the body was blessed with an incredible ability to heal itself. However, there's these tough things like mercury. But again, early on, dealing with toxins, the body has liver, kidney, colon, and we can get into some of those functions. But again, historically, we would have been dealing with coal from we would have been dealing with smoke from a fire, right? Or we would have been dealing with maybe some fungal toxicity that would have come from mushrooms growing under a tree, right? So it's like when the body was designed, definitely we have. Obviously, the liver, the major switchboard for helping your body detoxify. We obviously also have, the kidneys, the colon. Obviously, a lot of the foods that we innately would, consume are there to help elevate our body's levels of antioxidants to slough toxins out of the cells. Obviously, our whole alimentary canal is there to ensure that the body can get rid of poisons as they get into them. However, and actually, it's really, really cool. A couple years ago, I was at the Olympics in London in 2012, and we went to one of the Roman baths. So it's actually in Bath in the UK. And, this is where people used to go to detox, right? So, even historically, people knew that they had to let their body get into the right conditions so that their body could detox. But of course, what would they do? They would soak up the hot springs, obviously get the, excess nutrients into the system to help their body slough off toxins. I remember just the smell of some of these springs too. I mean, you could smell the sulfur. Obviously, some of the the foods that are high in sulfur. We talk about all the cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, for instance, are very, very effective at helping to bind toxins and get them out of the system. And of course, people even knew going back to the days of Bath in the UK. Hey, let's get that sulfur in the system. Let's get into the hot springs. Let's, get the minerals into the system so our body can start eliminating this stuff. And again, ultimately, what does it come down to? It comes down to intracellular detoxification, for which your body needs the right antioxidants. It needs the right minerals. It needs the right cofactors in order to get toxins out of the cells, out of the brain, out of the tissues, out of the nuclei of the cells where these things get trapped. And then we've got extracellular detoxification, which is where people need to ensure that whatever now gets out into the alimentary canal, everything from the mouth down to the colon, that is now that now is pushed out of the body. So and I think what we often see that people do one piece of it, but not a lot of it. Not the entire spectrum of everything that they really, really need to do to detox. I know there's a lot of products out there, for instance, that are out there to elevate glutathione, which again is your body's number one antioxidant, obviously, and this is playing a role to make sure that your body can get, toxins and poisons out of the cells. Vitamin C, which is, one of the major things required in one of the 3 phases of detoxification in the liver. That is actually an antioxidant because it helps to prevent the wasting of glutathione, which is what your body needs to push toxins out of the cells. There's a lot of stuff we're looking to raise, glutathione, but a lot of people they don't just detox, they actually retox, or they move toxins around in their system because they only take those minerals, nutrients, high antioxidants, sulfur-containing foods, and they move toxins around in the system, as opposed to now taking to the next step and making sure that we're having all the other things that are required to get toxins through the alimentary canal, through the gut. And historically, we know that some of the great nutrients that people have used, and there's articles on my website, drhardick.com, that relate to this, but people have used things like clay and activated charcoal, fiber, magnesium, anything possible to make sure that their body can actually cleanse. And of course, remember, you have the other people who unfortunately might just only try like a bowel cleanse or only try a colon cleanse, but toxins aren't typically just stored in the bowel. I would love it if they were just stored in the bowel. Truthfully, they're bound up in the system. You've got to get them out of the cells and then get them out of the body.
Is that one of the big mistakes that people make? Obviously, it seems that they're stuck on just having a better colon function and better bathroom or bowel movements. But they got to get it out of the cells themselves first, I would imagine, and then have them moved out. Correct?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So again, you got to think intracellular detoxification and extracellular detoxification. I'll never forget, and this isn't to be funny, but I'll never forget somebody telling me about the master cleanse for the first time. And I said, "What's that?" And of course, this was raised to my attention because I guess it's the cleanse that all the celebrities do, where it's like honey and cayenne pepper. Right. And then, and I was told, and you'll have these giant, all you have is this drink with honey and cayenne pepper and lemon or whatever it is, and you're going to have these monster bowel movements for a couple days. But at the end of the day, hey, trust me, I tried it. But one of the other things that when we speak with people that would be dealing with a lot of the cognitive issues. So people now have more depression than ever before. Certainly, I take care of a lot of families of kids where the kids have learning difficulties. I take care of a lot of folks where children have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Frankly, although there's a gut-brain axis, a lot of these families are concerned that there's toxicity even into the neural tissue for their kids, so you can't exclusively just do a cleanse. You've got to make sure you're getting the right nutrients into the system that help toxins get out of the cells, make sure you open up those channels, and also make sure that there's no you got to make sure that there's no dams in the river. So of course, I know I'm focusing a little bit on the bowel here, but you got to think about the liver. You got to think about the kidney as well. And depending on how deep you want to go on this as well, too, in the book, we do talk about, solutions for people if they have mercury fillings. And you know what? The solution is not just going and doing a cleanse. It's not even yanking out the mercury fillings. You often have to prepare the body. Make sure that there are no dams in the river so that once your body starts to pour this stuff out, there's no blockages and it can get out of the body. But it's got to be a very, very sequential process. And that was really the motivation for putting together Real Detox, just because unfortunately I've seen a lot of people do it the wrong way. And oftentimes people, they don't feel so good when they do a detox because they're missing one of the major pieces.
One of the things that I've seen that people consistently, quote unquote, do wrong is that they think they can go to any dentist and have all their mercury fillings pulled and then filled with a composite. The truth of the matter is if you pull them out the wrong way, it's worse than leaving them in. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and frankly, that's the first thing that I always hear is people say, "Hey, no, I have these mercury fillings, but I was told to just leave them in there." Well, if you looked at the material that is put together by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, they have material showing that there's mercury leaching from these things for up to 25 years after they are put into the mouth. Now, I know this. I asked this question of my dentist here in London. Great guy, love him to death. He's definitely a conventional dentist. He uses mercury, uses fluoride. Actually, he's no longer my dentist, but he was my dentist and was really, really trying to look at some moving things in a more holistic direction. I do, by the way, have a couple articles on my site just related to holistic dentistry, because if somebody does have a non-holistic dentist, there are ways you can get around that. You can definitely have a less toxic experience just by working with your current dentist. So it's not totally impossible. But I remember, chatting with this guy, and we were both 30 years old at the time. So he had only graduated a couple years earlier. And, he had expressed to me that one of the questions on the licensing exam to become a licensed dentist in my province was whether or not it was considered an act of professional misconduct to say that mercury fillings could be harmful to a patient. And obviously, you know what the answer is, absolutely not, meaning this is off limits. You can't communicate with that. You can't communicate to that effect with the patient. So this is unfortunately why oftentimes a lot of people will speak to their conventional dentist and say, "Hey, I have these mercury fillings. Is it a problem?" And they don't really get a straight answer because, again, in my province, and I would imagine in a lot of the states in the US and a lot of the other provinces in Canada, it's off limits for the dentist to go there. And, even if you go see a holistic dentist, they're still bound by the same code of conduct. So no dentist can really say, absolutely, these things are going to cause problems. They must come out of your mouth. However, if you would like me to remove them, there is a better way. Now, truthfully, there are good, better, and bad ways to do it. I always make sure we never, whoever, to our listeners today, please don't shut off iTunes and, go make an appointment right away to get your teeth pulled. Because first thing is, you got to take care of the body and make sure that you're doing everything nutritionally, eliminate all those dams in the river. But, like my holistic dentist, he has a real specialized technique to, get mercury out, out of the teeth. And the first thing that people may not realize, Noah, is that in order to get those silver fillings out, they have to drill them down. So, we don't go in there and tap them out and pull them out. They've actually got to be drilled down. So there is spilling and there is leaching of what is in there when they do go to get replaced. Now, I would probably agree that if somebody isn't taking care of themselves and if they don't have like an oxygen tank, or if the dentist doesn't have like a high suction, almost like a vacuum that is used while they are pulling the while they are drilling down the mercury fillings, hey, that person probably is going to have some problem. They're going to have some leaching. I would also say this too. There's a lot now, and this is one of the major reasons why I put together the book, was people got to think about, okay, what do they do that not only leading up to that dental visit to make sure that their liver and kidney and colon are in good condition, but even that day. So nutritionally, we'll see people do massive amounts of charcoal massive amounts of probiotic, massive amounts of vitamin C in a very, very particular sequence to ensure that the body can flush itself as it needs to flush itself when they do go through that experience. And so that's just some of the things that nutritionally would be done, but certainly the dentist visit should look much different than a visit to a conventional dentist. And I mean that with a lot of love, but that whole visit should look a lot different. The equipment would look a lot different. And that's where, and also that, the dentist should be using as many precautions. Frankly, the dentist and his or her staff should be wearing oxygen as well to protect their own selves, so that there's no, leaching of gases back into themselves. If I could, just before we go on, the other thing that I find is so ironic here is, again, if you were to ask the American Dental Association, could there be any harm with mercury fillings? The answer is no. There's no problem whatsoever while they're in your mouth. But again, all you need to do is you just need to ask your dentist, whether they're holistic or whether they're conventional, ask the question, well, gee, once you drill that stuff out, any pieces that you do suck back, I mean, what do you do with those? I mean, do you put them in the regular garbage disposable? Listen, anything that is extracted has to be treated as hazardous waste, which is the exact same way it is treated before it actually arrives to the dental office. So, you and I believe in universal laws, things that just make congruent sense. If it's toxic before and after it's in your mouth, I don't see how it's not toxic while it's in your mouth. So that's the decision. That's the decision maker for a lot of people in my experience.
People downplay how detrimental mercury is, and it's the number one worst, most dangerous neurotoxin. I mean,
Yes.
Just look at the package of a compact fluorescent light bulb. If you break one of those suckers in your house, you're supposed to get out of your house for
Yeah.
several hours. You're not supposed to go back in there. So to downplay it is just absolutely insane. So we talked about mercury fillings. We talked about heavy metals being passed down through breast milk and through your mother. We've talked about lead paints. What are some and eye care and vaccinations to get exposure to heavy metals? What are some other heavy metal exposures that we might be missing? Are there any other?
There absolutely are. Again, I think one of the biggest challenges for people now, and this is what I would see time and time again. I mean, frankly, you've hit the big ones. Certainly, yes, fish does have a significant higher level of mercury than do a lot of other meats and foods. So this is why pregnant females are always told to avoid fish because of the dangers of them. And again, why are the fish so toxic? Frankly, I don't know. Is it because of waste getting into the oceans? I don't know the answer to that question. But it is true that, fish do pose a greater risk. There was the actor Jeremy Piven a few years ago, and he made some headlines in the news about, dealing with severe mercury toxicity. And of course, they blamed it on all the sushi that he ate. But I've got to imagine there was more going on in his case. So people do need to look out for this. And again, this isn't a discussion about vaccines or not. Frankly, again, remember, anybody's free to come to any of the programs or seminars that I do, and I'll show you the mercury chart that showed up on my test. And I had never had a single vaccine. Now, when people do look at a package insert for the flu shot or for any of the vaccines, you will see that absolutely, indeed, thimerosal is still included in many vaccines today. I sit on the advisory board for greenmedinfo.com, website for which I have so much respect, founded by Sayer G. Everything is referenced just, like you wouldn't believe. Recently, an article just went up because, one of the things that we're often told is that we don't need to worry about one type of mercury versus another type of mercury. And of course, Green Med Info just completely killed that argument not too long ago. In fact, we need to be concerned about all the forms of mercury. They're all equally bad and sometimes even worse than what you might have expected. So, definitely, I know, frankly, for people that do want to go the route of vaccines, certainly I've worked with people that have, wanted to travel or they've gone on mission work and for whatever reasons they've had to get specific vaccines. They have requested a single vial vaccine, so they're not there's a single dose out of the vial. Obviously, mercury's in there thimerosal is in there as a preservative. So it is true, people, if they're trying to avoid it, they can get a mercury-free vaccine. Again, obviously the health agencies know that people are asking for these things. Again, and it's just so unfortunate now that, unfortunately, people, when they do go to ask these questions, though, they're made to feel like they're just, posing such a complication, and not, that they're just, completely, thinking as extremists. And, me having seen my numbers and knowing how much interference it created in my system and how much better I did once I eliminated what was in there, because I did get retested a year and a half later, and my numbers went down from, 20, somewhere between 26 and 27 down to 2.7, so I cut my mercury levels by 90% through the right protocols. Man, I'm telling you, people have every right in the world to find out what is in their drugs, what's in their food, what's in everything. So you've definitely hit the big ones for sure. But then, of course, the other one, just when it comes to, actually nutrition, nutrition and what goes on our plate, fish absolutely is always the biggie.
Let me just hit on one thing you said. Yeah. Is that Green Med Info is an incredible place for information. Sayer G is one of the most brilliant people I know, I'll be interviewing him for our upcoming summit in June, and he's just brilliant. So anything you need to know, that's a great place to look for. That's for sure. Yeah.
Sayer is a good friend of mine, and he's not only brilliant. I refer to him as the world's smartest person.
He's unbelievable.
He not only has been committed on Green Med Info, as I have been on my site, as I think you will see with more and more people that are out there in the online space, really to making sure that people can have access to great quality holistic care and holistic options. When I first met Sayer, and this was inspiration for me. I actually met him, and I met him in one of his former careers, actually working in a health food store. And frankly, I think, Noah, a lot of people have had the stigma that they get all their healthcare information just from a health food store, as if it's uneducated. Or now people are said, well, you just get your information off of Google. Well, so I meet Sayer in a health food store. And let me tell you, I start asking questions, and Sayer starts referencing this study and that study and this study and that study. Then I go to Green Med Info, and I realize that all of these things are all indexed. So people now absolutely can find a plethora of information on the National Library of Medicine. There's nothing that's in Real Detox. There's nothing that's on my website. There's nothing that's on Green Med Info, that doesn't have a solid reference back to something that's on the National Library of Medicine. So the research is indeed there. Unfortunately, not all of it always gets into the hands of people, but that's why you're doing what you're doing. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because we know that it is there. It has been researched at its various levels, and people can be very, very confident now in the holistic choices that they're making, especially when they're getting it from people like you, Sayer, and these other sites that have taken this to the next level. And that's what's been very exciting. I think even in the last 10 years, I remember, when you and I were in school, what we got at Life Grocery health food store, definitely might not have come across with the same level of credibility as what we know now is indeed the truth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Now, we don't have to get into very specifics, but give the audience a general progression of what you would do if you were going to do a detoxification protocol. No specifics necessary. We'll give the link to your ebook so they can get down and dirty with it. But what does a general progression look like?
Well, yeah, we'll hit on some of the basic things here. Frankly, I think the best thing is, people need to start, cleaning up the obvious things in their diets that are just wrecking their systems. Now, my recommendation, frankly, is to do this in stages. We actually know as well, Noah, when people do try to detox, especially when you think about a lot of the elements that are really, really screwing with people's brains and addictions. Like when we talk about getting off of sugar, people have to realize that sugar, nicotine, antidepressants, they compete with each other at the level of the brain. So I tell somebody, listen, if you're trying to quit smoking, if you're on a lot of medication that you're trying to get off of, you're also trying to quit sugar, you're trying to quit grains because those things turn into sugar very quickly when they get into the body, You have got to absolutely do this in stages. People have to understand that this is a process. This can't be done, in a week. It can't be done in a 30-day cleanse. But when it comes to changing nutrition, obviously, I have been a giant advocate, for many years now. The number one challenge for people, but it's going to have probably the biggest impact, absolutely, is cutting sugar. Of course, people don't realize how much sugar is in their diet. It's pervasive. It's always there. It's added to things. I was even eating at one of my favorite healthy organic places here locally not long ago, and I found out that there was sugar in something, and I thought, why? So the first thing is, cleaning up the diet, because I really believe that, first of all, when you start to eliminate the inflammatory things, you have to start adding in more of the good. And when you start adding in more, cruciferous vegetables, which is one element that's massively going to help your body detox, you're getting in the nutrients that you might not have had otherwise. So the first thing is, start on a low inflammation nutrition plan. Best way to do that is to eliminate sugar. I'm also a fan of eliminating grains. That's going to be a big step just for a lot of people, and even some people too, if they're highly, highly, highly inflamed, eliminating a lot of the higher sugar fruits is recommended as well. So I'm a northerner. If anybody saw my skin, it's usually very white. So from the part of the world where I am, I don't grow up. My ancestors didn't grow up with mangoes and pineapples around them all the time. So my body certainly is best, in a climate with less sugar. Now, some people can do okay with fruits that do have more sugar, but eliminating the inflammation, that's one of the major things. The other couple of key points that we talk about in my nutrition plan is, make sure that you're not having any of the dangerous fats in your diet. Probably the scary one now, Noah, that we see everywhere is that, I don't know if it's this way in New Jersey, but in Canada, canola oil still gets a pass. It still gets a hall pass, and it's just ridiculous because, again, it is a vegetable oil. Most of the time, it's genetically modified. And again, these things, they will clog up the cells. People have to remember that their cell membranes are made up of healthy fats. So, people can't detox if the cell membranes are all clogged up in the first place. And I'm using very simple terms here, but we got to make sure that the body's getting tons of the great, I don't even like the term good fats, the great fats, that were given to us in their natural state so the body can actually have cells that can eliminate poisons and absorb the proper nutrients. So that's another major element of the nutrition plan right there. The next step is, starting to look at, what's on, what's in your food. So obviously I'm a fan that any food should have, hopefully your food shouldn't even have a label. If your food has to have a label, that means it was manufactured somewhere. When I look at true whole foods, there is no label, and if there does have to be a label, you should be able to pronounce everything in there. Anything that should be on your label should be something that actually could be purchased for your pantry. So if you see something on there that's, like xanthan gum, for instance, I know there's non-GMO organic ways to produce xanthan gum, but I don't know anybody who buys xanthan gum for their house. So you should be looking at things that you would think about maybe buying for yourself, so making sure that you have as few ingredients as possible. This is the clean way to go, and then when we do get into certain elements of supplementation, we have, obviously in the book, we talk about basic, advanced, and then heavy metal toxicity, just on the basic level, there are certain key, nutritionals that I'm a big fan of. For instance, we do know that, vitamin D3 plays a huge role in the immune system. I would like people to get that by getting in the sunshine and by sweating and exercising. Right now we're recording this and I'm in Canada and you're in New Jersey, so I'm not getting a lot of sun. So obviously something like vitamin D3 would be huge on my nutrition plan. I want to make sure that that's getting in the system. And also whatever it takes to start to raise the body's levels of glutathione and the antioxidants, because that's what's going to help get poisons out of the cells. That's kind of the starting point. As we get further in the book, then we start saying, well, wait a second. Now, if somebody's even thinking if they have mercury fillings or they're dealing with a lot of heavy metal toxicity, if they have mercury fillings, no one really should, and this is a very key point, no one should get into any type of advanced heavy metal detox and I would suggest even if it is under the supervision of a natural health practitioner who does that. There are detox professionals that specialize in, in IV detoxification or others that supervise oral detoxification. But, if that's happening, we got to make sure that you definitely, if people have silver fillings in their mouth, I think the ideal approach would be get those things replaced. I mean, I can't, nor can you, nor can a dentist, as we know, say that someone must do it. But let me tell you, I mean, I know when I started learning about the dangers of these things, certainly, and I know how many countries that they're banned in, even though they're not banned in Canada, they're not banned in the United States. I certainly, was proud that my entire family had all of their silver fillings removed, even though that wasn't me. It was just everybody else in my family. So that's got to be done. But leading into that, now you've got to start to look at some of the key supplements that we do talk in the book that really, provide some strength and support to the liver. A lot of the key supplements that provide some strength and support to the kidneys. A lot of the supplements that provide some strength and support to the colon. And yes, that's probiotics, but we can take them much further from there. Then looking at, hey, now if we have pieces of toxins that are actually injected, or sorry, not injected, but implanted into the body, how those can be removed safely. And from that entire point, definitely, that's where, I know here where I live in Ontario, it would typically be like a naturopathic doctor who would have a license, but you'd also want to have someone who would have a specialty as well, where they can supervise the detoxification process. And I would love to say, Noah, that we could all just do it on our own, just eating better foods. But again, if people have chronic toxicity, it's very, very key that they work with detox professionals that understand this and that can help monitor the change for people. And don't get me wrong, it's not exclusively just a test for heavy metals. I mean, there are plenty of other tests that are out there, which I do reference in the book because there's so many that you can look at that look at accumulations of other environmental toxins. I mean, so those tests certainly can be done over time so that you can measure that what you're doing is absolutely working. The biggest myths that I see is people think that a detox is just a short cleanse and it's just going to be over in a month. Well, that's never going to happen. And the other thing is, a lot of people, they don't even think about how they're going to measure how well they do. You can't just tell me that you did a detox for a month and now you're detoxed. I mean, you don't know that. I would want to know that. And frankly, sometimes that's because the person stopped eating chips for the month, and that's why they think they're detoxed, but really they've just been eating less sugar or less garbage. So it's important to monitor those things. And that's why I think, even, you and I, Noah, we went to, I think, the purest chiropractic school on the planet that, really, really poised, chiropractors as primary healthcare providers in the world, but at the same time, my network here in my own community works with holistic dentists and naturopaths and people of all types of specialties because it really, really is needed as more and more of the world is moving from having things monitored by their conventional medical doctor and more into the holistic world. And if I could say one more thing, again, I grew up with my family doctor living right next door to my house as a little child. Just 2 nights ago, I was out to dinner with a good friend who's an MD. And you know what? He thinks this way. He thinks a lot like we do. So the times definitely are changing. However, they won't change without massive action and people making these changes. And unfortunately, although we've got lots of people on this podcast and they've already made a lot of changes, I know that I could just, even in my own neighborhood, or even just I could go on a walk around the block around my own clinic, and I could still open up medicine cabinets and find all kinds of kids and families taking drugs for conditions that they have no idea have natural solutions. So that's where our motivation lies.
Right. People need to understand that just like health, detoxification is a process, not an event.
It's a process, and it's a perpetual process, so it's something that you want to do on an ongoing basis perpetually. And I think, there's times that you want to ramp it up. I think there's definitely people will want to ramp these things up when they think about, quote, spring cleaning. They want to do it, first of the year. And there are times to really, really go hardcore, but it's something that can and should be in your everyday life. Even when people think back, when I think back to like the Roman baths up there in Bath in the UK. Well, this is why people do magnesium baths, and this is why people now, do Epsom salt baths for their kids like every day. Obviously, saunas, although I'm more of a fan of an infrared sauna as opposed to more of just a traditional sauna with cedar, which can create some issues. Definitely this is people have always known that there's things that can be done in our ancestral cultures that every single day are working to detoxify. We always talk about the pillars of health, thinking about, what do we need to do to be well? And even in seminars that I've done, I've talked about, maximizing and optimizing the nutrients, maximizing, exercise, maximizing sleep, maximizing, obviously as a chiropractor, I've always, grown up knowing that we need to, maximize the expression of the central nervous system, but again, the need to actually not only maximize the toxins, but maximize the good stuff. The need now to minimize and eliminate the garbage that is in our systems as a result of environmental pollution and industry. That has become more and more prominent. But it's not only in the last 100 years. We know historically people have always looked at eliminating from their system these things that have accumulated. Although the toxins that we deal with right now, much worse than they were 100 years ago. You would know even from our books from chiropractic school back then. Back about 80 years ago, it was written in a lot of the early chiropractic textbooks how people were becoming so toxic just because of some of the early painkiller medications. Well, those don't even hold a candle to a lot of the stuff that's out there right now. So it's definitely got to be something that's a perpetual goal and a process for everyone. And it's all about expressing the best health the way your body was supposed to in the first place.
Yeah. The notion that it was more toxic 50 years ago than it is now, it's way more toxic now. It's just we live in a really, really toxic environment, and that's why, Dr. Hardick, let the audience know what the link for your ebook is.
Sure. If you go to drhardick.com, which is just Dr. Hardick, doctor, so Dr. Hardick, HARDICK.com. It's all over the website, but it's drhardick.com/real detox, real-detox. And again, that's the ebook. And, really, I wanted to put this out really just as kind of a free gift to my community. When I started thinking about putting together some works on detox, whether it was the process for, what do you do nutritionally, or what do you do supplementation wise leading up to that experience with the dentist, or how do you find a dentist, or how do you find a detox professional? How do you know whether you're toxic? I realized that it was much more than an article that I needed to put together. I really had to pull it all. And by the time I pulled it all together, I said, man, this is really more of an ebook more than anything else. So that I just really wanted to get to people in a concise form. And then certainly once people get that, we have plenty of supportive resources on drhardick.com that relate to detox, the nutrition plan, and everything else that's referenced in the book.
BJ, I couldn't thank you enough for being on today. Do you have any last words?
No last words other than just that I'm deeply grateful for all that you and your team continue to do to save lives from your base in New Jersey, but really around the world. So thank you.
Great. Thank you again, my friend. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. You can sign up for our incredible weekly email at www.centerforepigeneticexpression.com. And please let me encourage you to check out our first project's last summit called the Pain Relief Project at www.painreliefproject.com. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.